Welcome to the Introspective Collective podcast. Today's topic is it the message or is it the messenger? Desiree?
Okay. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today for our topic. And is it the message or the messenger? What comes to mind, and I'll use myself as an example, and, was speaking with a couple of other people. It seems sometimes when people are very direct or will tell, and I can say, it's based on perception. So my truth may not be your truth, but from my perspective, my truth, sometimes it seems that unintentionally, and I'll speak for myself, it's unintentional, that people's feelings get hurt, or they don't like the fact that you're, speaking the truth. However, when they want to know the truth, then they know who to go to, right? But I find that can be a slippery slope.
Mhm.
So, asking the question, is it the message or the messenger? And I would like to preface, this with, I get it. My father taught me it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I do understand if someone's being aggressive, if you can tell that their intent is to be hurtful, because the truth can be used to hurt if that is a person's intent. So I get that. So I don't want to negate that sometimes people can be the truth teller, but their heart isn't in the right place. But speaking for myself and some of the other people that I know that just tend to be very direct and upfront, oftentimes it's not received well. So I will ask my colleagues here. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm listening to what you're saying. Um, I I think it's important, are you talking to a crowd? Are you talking to someone personal? So who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? And I think intent is important, but impact is also important. When you're trying to deliver a message to, let's say, people that you don't know, and maybe don't know you, perhaps you're going to have a mixed crowd of people who take it the way you intended, and you may have some people that may not, that may be offended, even though your intent may be a positive one. I think when it comes to people that you know or your family who know you, I think the same thing can kind of ring true. But still, I think the speaker, the truth teller, the message giver, still has to be mindful of who they're dealing with, because people have different personalities. People receive things different ways. We know some people, we just know certain people's personalities, right? So the best that the messenger can do is, yes, be mindful of how you say what you say, but being honest, I think, is the most important thing. And then how they receive it, you can't always control.
True.
You
True,
know,
true.
if you're doing it with the right intent and you're being honest and they don't receive it in a healthy way or in the way that it was intended, I think that's where a relationship comes into play, and it just may end up being a discussion, right? And maybe you can clarify, in the discussion, or maybe that person is hurt and they're just going to be hurt for a little while until they process it, but I think for the messenger, your intention, your audience, and being honest, I mean, I think that's of the highest integrity. So sometimes the messenger just has to be the messenger, and the impact is going to be the impact.
Right. And, Preston, when you think about that, I know this is something we three have used in other formats. You have to think about the intent versus the impact. And as one of my phrases, also the interpretation.
Yes.
So, someone's intent, let's really be real about the motivation. I know my grandmother would always say, is it necessary? Is it kind? And is it truthful? Sometimes, or like our family has said to us, sometimes if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And so when you think about, like Des said, It's not always what you say, but how you say it. Think about the motivation for which something is being said. And like you said, Preston, the relationship. Sometimes people can hear certain things better from, certain people. Like, you might have someone, that they hold high esteem, which they may hear something or difficult from that person than someone that they don't have much respect for. But then we also, if we know that our intent is in the right place, we don't have control on how that person may receive it, right?
Yes.
And then also, how does that person's psychological landscape or their experiences in life, or the lens in which they view life or a particular situation, how does that then cause them to interpret what was being said? And so, there's so much with communication. It's not just what the words that are being used, but it's also the nonverbal. It's also time and place. Is this the right time to bring this up? Could there be a better time? So, it's so much with communication that, and sometimes, we know that the messenger sometimes does get shot, unfortunately, just trying to say the truth, and we always hear, like, I'm just keeping it real,
Right. Right.
and one thing that I know that some people would like to say, Paula, you always saying this. Well, it is what it is. That's neither being a pessimist, but the reality is, it is what it is. And sometimes we color things what we believe should be, rather than looking at it as what it really is. Des, I know you wanted to chime in. I'm gonna throw it to you.
Okay. So a couple things, I'm listening to the two of you, and it's true. So when we look at intent versus impact, when we look at timing, when you think about your audience, and I'll just say, using myself as an example again, is that I had to learn the younger Desiree versus the older Desiree. In youth, I'll say, not that I thought this at the time, but there's a degree of, I guess, arrogance with youth, because there's some ignorance there that you don't necessarily recognize, right? So
True.
over
True.
time, I have grown, and I had to learn those things. It's like, well, for me, for people that genuinely know me, my intent is not to harm. If that were true, people would know that. So sometimes it's hard, but I've learned to implement a filter. Most days, I've learned to try to choose my words more carefully, considering my audience and who I'm speaking to, especially if it's someone that I love and care about, family members, friends, colleagues, whomever, because once you know that personality, then hopefully you can choose your words more carefully so that they can be receptive, because that the intent should be, and hopefully the impact will be, that they can be receptive of what it is that you have to say. On the other end of that, though, on the receiving end of that, people also have to be mindful too, because personally, I don't believe that someone should be a contortionist and have to bend themselves in a way that you no longer are being your true self, because you're modifying so much the way you say things, because you're trying not to hurt that person's feelings. If you know me and you know my intent, that I'm just a direct person, but I'm not trying to hurt you, then somewhere on that end too, we have to be mindful of our own sensitivities or insecurities. And I have to do that myself. Sometimes when people say things, I'm like, did they mean this, or did they mean that? Or is it me? Or am I in a bad mood? Am I irritable? Maybe I'm taking it the wrong way. Communication, clarifying, can you explain exactly what you mean? So that way you don't jump to conclusions and assume someone's trying to be hurtful when maybe that's not the case, because that goes on both ends. The person that's communicating and the person that's on the receiving end of the communication. So with all of that being said,
Yeah.
as an individual, we have to be mindful if we're that personality and our communication style is to be very direct, or sometimes people say brutally honest. I'm like, well, what do you want? Do you want somebody to tell you what you need to hear, or somebody that's telling you what you want to hear? What are their intent? They might be giving you flowery little words, but are they really your friend, or are they just going along to get along? Because I say, if I love you, then I love you enough to tell you the truth. Yes, timing is everything. If this is not a good time, then ego needs to be put in check, because then it's about me and not the person. If I know this is not a good time where you're not going to be receptive, then yes, I need to save that for another day. But then there's sometimes in some situations, it's never going to be a good time. So at some point, you just have to kind of put it out there. And what I've learned to do is preface it with, I say this lovingly and respectfully. And then I just go for it, because sometimes I can't find, honey coated, sugary words to say what it is that I need to say.
And some topics, are more urgent than others. And you make me think about when you talked about, sometimes we have to be mindful of, who's delivering the message and who we're delivering it to. And sometimes, perhaps we need to, think more communal in that way, and perhaps, delegate someone else, perhaps to have the conversation with the person, as a possibility. But sometimes you may not have that luxury, or maybe there's no one else around. And again, you have to, kind of stand by your principles in terms of, what is my intent, and, being mindful of how I deliver my message. But, sometimes it could be something that there's someone else that's more appropriate, to have that conversation with them. Sometimes we know going into a certain conversation, just because of who it is, there's a potential that it cannot be received well. If
True.
there's some discord, but in that relationship already, you know, um, it's a very good chance that, it could be explosive. And I was laughing when you were talking before, and I was thinking about kids. It's classic where a parent is talking to their child or their children, and they tell them something over and over again, and they don't listen to it. But then they go to someone else and they tell them the same thing. And it's
True.
like the light goes off,
Yeah.
and it's like you haven't been telling them that the whole time.
Yeah.
And sometimes the messenger, their message, people or children, or even, others, can get a little tone deaf to your message. Sometimes they get tired of hearing the message from you, the way you deliver the message. So
True.
they can get a little burnt out, or just kind of like tune you out. And so I think we have to recognize that too, particularly in, close relationships, family relationships. And again, sometimes there's another person who, perhaps, I'm thinking community again, a village or family, that can have the conversation with you and them in the room, or perhaps hand it to them to have the conversation. Um, but again, sometimes there aren't those options, and you have to be the deliverer of the message, and sometimes the messenger, they're going to catch it,
And Preston, not to cut off,
Yes.
you made me think about this. Universal truths are just that, universal truth. And no matter what, truth is truth, and it is going to come through. And sometimes you're right. Some people can't hear the truth because, and we could just fill in the blanks with that.
Right.
But I do think of something, and I don't really want to go too deep, because but I do think this is one example when I think about, is it the message or the messenger? We recently recorded about infidelity, and we all know that sometimes you're that person's best friend, right? And
Mhm.
what if you saw something? Now, each of us has the right to make a decision whether we want to say something to that friend who we have maybe seen their partner in a compromising situation. So that's one I think about when we talk about, is it the message or the messenger? And then another one, and I'll use myself personally, thinking about sometimes there are just things that you may know about a person, but they can't handle it, no matter how it's being said.
Right.
That's true. That's true, Paula.
And I remember talking with another colleague, and the colleague was telling me about his mother and her best friends. And he said, my mother had a friend for over 30 years, and sometimes she chooses not to say something to her best friend because she knows no matter how she says it, she's not going to hear it. And that takes me to what our title is it the message or is it the messenger? Because the message does, I would think, the message is probably maybe too much for the person to hear, but they'll block the messenger and be angry with the messenger.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, I think about those two instances when thinking and reflecting on what we're saying, because, and I'm of the ilk, as I would say to my daughter and my grandchildren, look, I'm not going to tell you anything wrong. I'm telling you because you need to hear it from someone, and sometimes that is the point, that we might see something with a close friend, family member, and we watch other people, and I've seen this happen. Other people are laughing and snickering, but this person is oblivious, and I'm like, that's not fair.
That's true. You're right.
Everyone else is seeing this, but you're oblivious. And I'm not just talking about infidelity. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
Like, who would you want to hear the truth from but from a friend?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say, there's been instances that, again, I'll put myself out there, years ago, where someone had brought to my attention, oh, Des, I know you're real and all, but when you say things, it hurts my feelings. And, I had to say, I won't say what I was thinking in my head initially, but then I had to say, and I challenge other people to do the same, that we also have to be open to that feedback. So I said to myself, okay, Des, that your intent is never to be malicious or malice or whatever. However, if the way you're communicating is offensive, then, okay, Desiree, then you need to be mindful. Hence, where I make a sincere effort. Most days, I'm human. I may fall short. So I'm going to just put that out there. But I make an effort most days. Really, I try to all the time to be mindful of what I'm saying, how it may come across. I even got to the point where when there's new people that are introduced into the group, I just put it out there. I say, hey, I'm very honest and direct. I don't mean any harm, just so you know that about me. So please don't take anything the wrong way. And if you do, please bring it to my attention. So that way, hopefully we'll start off on the right foot and we won't have any issues. So, we do all the way around. We need to be kind of self-aware and be mindful, because it is about relationships. And that's the purpose of us having these discussions, because the people in my life, I love the people in my life, and I'm mindful too, Paula, like you said too. And I would say the intent might be negative, but I get what you're saying is, if you have nothing good to say nothing at all. And I'll just apply it as, if it's not the right time, or if it's not going to be received, then it's lost anyway. So sometimes you just need to hold that until a more appropriate time. Or sometimes, like you said, if the person is not going to be receptive, why even waste your time? We got to put our egos in check too, going back to what is the reason, the intent for us saying whatever it is that we feel the need to say.
Okay. as we wrap up this session, I think we all can hear or have said very relevant points about this, because sometimes it is difficult to know when and where is the right time, because I think one of you said it's never a good time for
Mhm.
some people.
Mhm.
Okay, so listeners, we want to say thank you for tuning in to yet another IRC Introspective Collective podcast. Please feel free to share the link with your loved ones and friends and like us. And we will see you next time. Be well, take care, and make peace your priority.